They told Denzel Washington this was a friendly, off-camera conversation at the Late Show with Stephen Colbert. They said it would be relaxed. Nothing heavy. That was the plan. But tonight, the real question wouldn't come from a producer. It would come from Denzel himself. Denzel took his seat across from Stephen Colbert, the late-night host, offering a warm smile and a cheeky nod. Stephen said, "Denzel Washington, welcome back. It's always a pleasure." Denzel returned the nod and said, "Thanks, Stephen. Good to be here." Audience applause followed, light and familiar. Stephen said, "We've got a lot to talk about, your new film, upcoming roles. But tonight, we're going to get a little deeper." Denzel said, "I appreciate that." Stephen leaned forward. He said, "Let's start with your movie. It's about government corruption, secret interests, moral compromise. How close is that to reality?" Denzel said, "Closer than people want to admit." Stephen nodded slowly. He said, "In what way?" Denzel said, "When we follow the money, that's where power lives." Stephen said softly, "So, money shapes what decisions get made." Denzel smiled faintly. He said, "It always has." Stephen said, "Are you talking politics, business, both?" Denzel said thoughtfully, "All of it. Anywhere influence wants a host." Stephen said, "That's a big claim. Something you believe deeply." Denzel said firmly, "I believe we should ask who we're serving." Stephen paused. He said, "Who? Who are we serving?" The audience leaned forward. Denzel said, "That's the question." He let the words land. Stephen shifted in his seat. He said, "Tell me more. Because I'm curious. Who are you serving, Denzel?" Denzel locked eyes with him. He said, "I serve the story, and the truth beneath it." Stephen said, "Truth isn't often profitable." Denzel said, "Then maybe profit isn't the best measure." Silence held. The audience sat in thoughtful stillness. Stephen said, "Are you saying truth and profit collide?" Denzel said, "They do, and truth should win." Stephen smiled, intrigued. He said, "So, who are you working for?" Denzel said quietly, "I work for the people who listen." A beat. Stephen studied him. He said, "The people who listen, who are they really?" Denzel paused. He said, "The ones who care about more than the noise." There was a shift in the room. The energy changed. Stephen said softly, "So not the people who watch the headlines, they watch the context." Denzel said, "They watch the context. And they ask questions." Stephen said, "The powerful question, who's paying for the narrative?" Denzel said, "Exactly." The audience shifted, like a new thought had landed. Stephen nodded slowly. He said, "You didn't come here to plug a film. You came to ask the question." Denzel said, "I came to remind us we still can." Stephen leaned back, camera zoomed in. He said, "And what if they don't want to?" Denzel said, "Then we ask anyway." The studio exhaled. The cameras cut back after a commercial break, but the rhythm had shifted. The audience was quieter now, attentive. Denzel Washington and Stephen Colbert sat closer, not physically, but in tension, leaning into an exchange that was growing sharper, more exacting. Stephen said, "We talked about truth winning. That's a noble idea. But it doesn't pay the bills, Denzel. Someone's paying for the production, the marketing, the distribution." Denzel said, "I know that. But influence costs more than money. It costs conscience." Stephen leaned forward. He said, "Are you saying that people in power are selling their conscience?" Denzel said, "If you let profit outweigh principles, you've made a choice. And every choice has a cost." Stephen asked, "So in your film, you play a character forced to choose. Is that based on real people you've seen?" Denzel said quietly, "Yes. Those who chose comfort over conviction. Those who stayed silent when speaking could cost them." The audience stirred. Stephen said carefully, "You're talking about Hollywood. But let's go bigger. Politics. Are you talking about politicians?" Denzel said, "I'm talking about everyone with a platform. Especially those who preach virtue in public but compromise in private." Stephen held his breath. He said, That sounds like a direct charge. Denzel said softly. It's a reminder. Words without action are just echo. Stephen said. So if someone doesn't act on their words, they're just echo? Denzel said, exactly. Echoes fade. Actions stay. Stephen paused. He said, all this talk. Who do you think of? Anyone in particular? Denzel said, I think of all of us. Myself included. It's not about naming names. It's about owning up. Stephen nodded. He said, so we all need to ask ourselves, who do we really work for? Denzel said, yes. That question matters more than titles or incomes. They both sat for a moment, eye contact unbroken. Stephen said, hard questions for hard times. Denzel said, that's why we ask them. The audience sat in silence. Then the host began to speak again. Stephen said, all right, let's pivot. You've also been a mentor to young actors, people who look up to you. What do you tell them about working in an industry tainted by compromise? Denzel said, I tell them, never quit asking who you work for. Because the day you stop asking, that's the day you stop caring about what you build. Stephen said, even if the path is harder, even if you lose roles. Denzel said, especially then. Character costs. But it pays back in more than salary. Stephen nodded slowly. He said, there it is. Character over compensation. The exchange had grown more intimate, more urgent. Stephen said, but here's the twist. Audiences want both, truth and entertainment. Can you offer both? Denzel said, I believe you can, if the story is real enough. Stephen said, so you're betting on authenticity? Denzel said, I'm betting on courage. The show shifted again, light applause from viewers ready to move on, but something had changed. A quiet question hung in the air. Who are we working for, truly? The stage lights warmed the studio for the final segment. Stephen Colbert closed his notebook, the casual tone replaced by introspection. He said, Denzel, any last thought you want to leave us with? Denzel paused, looking directly into the camera as if speaking to every viewer. He said, I want people to know this. Every action, big or small, is a vote for who you work for. It's easy to say you stand for truth. The hard part is living it, especially when no one's watching. Stephen nodded thoughtfully. He said, you once told me the story matters most. Now it seems you're saying the storyteller matters just as much. Denzel said softly, yes. Because a story without integrity is an empty shell. And the storyteller who won't ask, who do I work for? That person has lost their way. A quiet hush fell. The audience felt the weight of it. Stephen said, so if someone's listening, maybe late at night, they say to themselves, I want to do right, but the world makes it harder. What do they do? Denzel looked at them. He said, they pause. Then they recommit. Then they live their answer. Stephen said, pause. Recommit. Live it. That's powerful. Denzel said, because truth isn't loud. It's consistent. There was a moment, a collective inhale before the applause began, thoughtful and reserved. Stephen smiled softly. He said, thank you, Denzel Washington, for reminding us who we work for. Denzel nodded. He stood, walked off slowly, the applause following him with respect, not fanfare. This is the USA Liberty. If you've ever paused mid-choice and asked yourself, who do I really work for? You're not alone. Maybe it's time to remind ourselves. Subscribe if you believe that integrity isn't a role, it's a daily choice. Because here, truth isn't just told. It's lived.